Okay, are you enjoying Photoshop so far? Are you having some fun? I hope you're having some fun here. I gotta show you something a little bit different from sort of the topics that we've been discussing up until this point. I want to talk about something inside Photoshop which you're gonna love if you've never heard of it before. It's called history. And, you know, I may have mentioned it briefly earlier. I'm not sure. I don't remember. But essentially, you can think of your history inside Photoshop as like a mega undo, if you will. You know when you're going along in a program, any program really, and you want to step back one step, right? Well, of course, we just head up to the edit menu and choose undo. Now, I can't undo because I haven't performed any commands on my particular photo here. But normally you would just choose edit undo, or of course you would hit Control Z on the PC side or Command Z here on the Mac to undo. Now, as shocking as it may sound, Photoshop has one undo. So the image editing standard application across the entire world has one undo, if you can believe it. Well, many years ago, in a previous version of Photoshop, they introduced this thing called history, and essentially what it does is, again, it's kind of this idea of a mega undo. So the history is going to track everything that you do inside Photoshop. It's like Photoshop's history panel is watching you, and it's recording everything that you do. And then what you can do from that point is then you can go back in time, hence the term history. You can literally step backwards through all of your various steps if you want to undo. Now, enough babbling. Let me show you how this is actually going to work. Do you have your history panel open on screen? I hope you do. If not, of course, just head up to your window menu and look for history. And we see some weird stuff inside the history panel. We see our image there, barn1.jpg, and then open. So the history panel is already recording what you and I are doing here. We opened the file and it recorded that. That's fantastic. Now, what I'm going to do next is I want to throw on just a couple of really quick commands, and I'm going to get into some filters, and I'm going to throw on a color correction command here as well. We'll talk about filters, and we'll talk about special effects, and we'll talk about color correction in just a little while. I just want to throw a couple of quick commands onto my image because really this discussion is all about history, right? So here's what I'm going to do very quickly with you is I'm going to head up to the filter menu and then down to artistic. And again, don't get hung up on filters for now. And I'm just going to choose dry brush, and that's going to open me up into this massive dialog box. Let's not even concern ourselves with this dialog box. Just click on OK. That's all I want you to do. And you'll notice now inside the history palette, we have open, and then now we have dry brush. So the dry brush effect, or the dry brush command, has now been applied to our barn. Okay, let's keep moving here. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to filter, and this time I'm going to go down to brush strokes, and then I will choose angled strokes. Something like this, back into the same dialog box. Again, I'm just going to keep on moving here. I'll click on OK. And then, of course, now inside the history palette, we now have the dry brush and the angled strokes commands here. Let's do one more here. I'm going to go for my color correction command now. So back to the menu bar across the top. This time I'm going to head to the image menu, down to adjustments, and then over to brightness contrast. All I want you to do inside this brightness contrast dialog box is move the sliders around a little bit. Just do something like that. It doesn't really matter a whole lot. Go ahead and click on OK. All right. So now, inside the history panel, we have barn1.jpg across the top. We have open, we have dry brush, we have angled strokes, and we have the brightness contrast. So again, the history panel is watching. It's keeping an eye on everything that we're doing here. Now, what I could do at this point in the game is I could say, you know, the brightness contrast, I'm not feeling it. I want to back up one step. Well, I could use my keyboard shortcut, Control Z or Command Z on my keyboard here, or I could head up to the edit menu and I could choose undo and then the name of the previous command that I just used. So in my case, brightness contrast. So I'm going to choose edit, undo brightness contrast. And what happens here is the command or the effect is removed from my image, and it's also removed from my history palette. Now, this is the part that I want to show you. Let's say I want to undo my angled strokes as well. I'm going to go back to the edit menu, and there is no undo angled strokes. There's only redo brightness contrast. So in other words, again, there's only one level of undo that we have available to us here inside Photoshop. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to choose Redo Brightness Contrast. And of course, what that does is that reapplies brightness contrast. I see brightness contrast now showing up inside the history palette as well. So it's kind of weird, but hopefully nothing too, earth-shattering here for you. Now, in the next exercise, I want to dig a little bit deeper into the history palette with you.